It was very interesting listening to your podcast and loving the idea of Fela Kuti and loving the music. I also said to myself, somewhere around episode 3 or 4, I was like, I don't think I would ever want to hang out with this guy.
Yeah, I know.
Would you want to?
No, I don't think I could.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your podcast. I've been loving it. It's been so interesting to see where your mind has been taking you post Radiolab.
Yeah.
It is an exciting possibility model. It sounds like you just do what the hell you want to do.
I'm glad to. I'm going to embrace your interpretation of me, because sometimes to be in my head,
Yeah.
maybe this is true of all humans, right?
Yeah.
From inside this head, sometimes I'm like, what the F are you doing with your time? Like, you should be. So sometimes I beat myself up for being all over the place, but those are like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Tuesday, Thursday, I feel really happy and excited to just be chasing things I want to chase, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk about that and how Fela Kuti, a musician who has had an outsized influence on the culture, global culture, how he became a podcast obsession of yours that ended up having you spend, 2 to 3 years talking to folks about him, and now giving us a podcast series full of stories and wisdom about his life. When did you, Jad, say, yeah, I would like to devote a few years of my life to Fela?
First of all, Sam, I just want to say it's really cool to talk to you. I've been
Likewise.
listening to you for since I left Radiolab. I've been you're on my heavy rotation, so it's cool to
I
actually
appreciate
suddenly
it.
be speaking with you. But anyhow, to your question, when I was leaving Radiolab, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do at that point, whether I was going to do more podcasts. So right in that transitional space, a friend that I've known for years, Ben Adair, told me about a new friend of his, Ian Wheeler, who works with the Kuti family, and was like, would you ever consider doing a Fela Kuti thing? Because we could get the rights to the music. And I was like, oh, cool. I love Fela. I've always loved Fela's music. I didn't know a lot about his story.
Mhm.
So I immediately did that thing which is very me, which is to pre-panic and be like,
Okay.
oh my God, if we're going to do a Fela thing, I should make some calls. We didn't really there was no deal. There was no podcast. There was no plan at this point. It was just an idea.
Mhm.
But I started doing some interviews just to see what stories might be out there.
You are a true journalist. Before there's even a pitch, you're making calls, doing interviews. I love it.
Well, because my worst fear is that you pitch a thing and then suddenly it's like an arranged marriage, right? You have to marry the pitch when someone says yes. And so yeses are what we're all chasing, but yeses are obligations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to be obliged to make a thing.
You can't divorce a podcast.
Exactly. So I made a bunch of calls, and then I just didn't stop. And I mean, a year into the process, we didn't know where this was going. We had no home. We'd had some sort of flirtations with various places, but no one had said yes. And I had done 80 interviews at that point.
Really?
Yeah, because it was one of those things where even just to explain who Fela was and why he made the music he made and what was the music, you have to understand so many levels of context and that context is fascinating. And it felt really good at that point it felt like a privilege really to be able to get out of my brain and immerse myself in someone else's reality.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's all the responsibilities that come with that, but it just felt really good to have a place to go. So I just kept interviewing people. And then by the time someone said, yeah, we want to make this into a podcast, I was hundreds of interviews in, and I kind of had already mapped it out, you know?
Really?
It's not a healthy way to work, but
yeah.
But it was just how and that's weirdly how it always happens with me.
And for those who don't know who he is, describe Fela Kuti and his impact in 90 seconds or less.
Tall order. Fela Kuti, for those who don't know him, he is one of the most consequential, controversial musicians of the 20th century. He's a Nigerian musician who made music from the late 60s all the way to the late 90s, invented a style of music called Afrobeat, which contained jazz, some James Brown style funk, some Yoruba drumming, some sort of big band dance kind of music. And he sort of blended it all into this very global style. But it wasn't just music. It was actually the music became kind of the container for a political rebellion that almost toppled a dictatorship. So he is a case study in why music matters, I think. Like why it's not just like entertainment, but it actually can change things.
Yeah. Well,
How'd I do?
and
Was that like
I loved it. I
all right,
loved it.
good,
I
good.
mean, yeah, more than any artist of the last, what, let's say 75 years. He really put the P in protest music. He
Yeah.
lived it, breathed it. And he was the founder of a genre that is ubiquitous and now globally dominant,
Mm-hmm.
Afrobeat.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't people talk about him more? I know so many hip hop heads here in the States. I know so many people who love pop music and are obsessed with the industry, and they don't talk about Fela. Why
Yeah.
not?
It's a hard one because he studiously avoided being commodified. Or
Mm,
let me say it differently. He would not let anyone commodify him other than himself, right?
okay.
Like he had this policy that when he would go out on tour, he would not play the hits because those were
Really?
old. Like as soon as it
Yeah.
was on a record, he's not playing it at the shows.
Really?
Drove the record label bonkers
I'm sure.
because they were like, "This is how you build an audience, man."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he was like, "No, I don't want to do it." He would not. His music is 35 minutes long, right, per song.
Mhm.
Sometimes he would
Mhm.
not make radio edits, so
Really?
which drove the record label crazy
Yeah.
because that's how you get out to the world. So he had this. He was just a pain in the ass to any entity that wanted to come in and try and make a buck off of him.
Oh, yeah. And he
Which
was he was really out there. He would, like, wear just his underwear a lot.
yeah,
He was kind of erratic, kind of just, like, all over the place, his bundle of energy. He was a
yeah.
lot.
He was a lot, and he had a commune. He married 27 women on the same day, which is a hard thing to wrap your mind around and to sort
Yeah.
of talk about.
Yeah.
So I think a combination of all of those things make him a jagged shaped person. He's not easily consumable in the way that we consume music these days.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, people know him, as you say, as like, oh, he's like kind of like Bob Marley, kind of. He's like the other guy, you know.
Yeah.
People sort of see him that way. But the Marley estate I think has an easier time marketing Bob Marley than the Fela estate has at marketing Fela, because he's a difficult figure, which makes him interesting, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Let's talk about his music and the type of music he became known for. We now call it Afrobeat, but that wasn't the music that he was making at the start. And when he began to make it, it was kind of unlike anything Africa had heard before.
yeah,
Can you walk us through briefly how he went from a straight ahead jazz musician, flirting with some modern jazz genres like high life, how he
yeah.
went from that to this African sound that was as much James Brown as Africa?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really interesting story that is like this he was in this really amazing soup or maybe it's like a game of telephone between the continent and the diaspora, right? So he grows up in a place called Abeokuta. He's singing in the choir. He's playing classical music. He goes to London to go to school, presumably for med school, but then ends up sneaking into the music program. And he's playing jazz. He's playing like Miles Davis is coming through town at that point. This would be 1958. So he's hearing Miles Davis. He's hearing Count Basie. He's making music that is in that adjacent space. Um, Ultimately comes to America. He has a band called Kula Lubitos, right, which is a made up word that's just meant to sound Latin because that's what was cool in West Africa at that point.
Really?
Yeah, sort of Latin tinged music. So he
Huh.
comes to America, goes on tour with Kulubitos. They their visas run out. They're broke. He
Wow.
gets stuck. He
Oh
ends
my
up meeting
goodness.
a woman named Sandra Isidore, who was a member of the Panther Party at that point.
Yeah. And the star of your podcast. She's just
She's
every
incredible.
second of tape. You're like, wow, yeah,
Yeah,
her.
she's amazing. I got to spend 7 hours with her in L.A.
Wow.
It was one of the highlights of this whole experience.
Yeah.
But she is a large, amazing presence, and basically they fell in love, and he's like, wow. These Black Americans are like incredible. They're like, they're fighting injustice, they're organizing. Why can't Africans be that way? And he says this to her. She loses her mind and then starts educating him on the history of race in America. It goes to her bookshelf, gets the autobiography of Malcolm X, gives it to him. He has an awakening where he's like, oh my God, like and so in a way he becomes, and he says this himself, he becomes African in America and then goes back to Nigeria. And it's interesting the way that like the political, like all those political ideas changed the sound of his music. Like he suddenly, like he had been kind of flirting with some James Brown style percussion and horns and stuff. But he comes back to Nigeria and suddenly you hear this blend of like James Brown funk and the drumming, Tony Allen drummer is just like channeling Yoruba rhythms. That high life sound that he'd been into suddenly gets real hard
And would you
and
say
real.
High Life was this version of, I don't know, uppity Nigerian jazz?
Yeah, it's like kind of like ballroom dance music
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
of that era.
Yeah.
And like suddenly it's not so genteel anymore, but it's really like
Yeah.
fierce. And it somehow he needed the ideology to unlock that music.
Yeah.
And
What ideology did she give him specifically, besides just saying you should think more about politics, or this is
I
all
think it's
political?
I think it was really just about the struggle to break from history. You know,
Mm,
like that was. I mean, I think African Americans have always sort of been. I mean, I say this from the outside clearly, but always been a beacon to the diaspora in terms of struggling against oppression. And she explained to him the history and that the break they were trying to make. He went back, and he was the product of a colonial system, and he suddenly saw it for what it was, and then dedicated the rest of his life to speaking out against it and pointing toward a new way.
yeah. Yeah. Afrobeat is a kind of music that everyone here in this podcast has heard, even if they haven't categorized it as such. We'll add some examples of current Afrobeat in post to this,
Hmm.
but like, how would you describe that sound for people who can't yet put their fingers on it?
Yeah, I would classify. I mean, Afrobeat has many chapters in the Felaverse, right? So, like for me, when I think about Afrobeat, I think about the kind of music he made from 1972 to like 78, and that kind of music it usually starts slowly and it's got a groove. So first of all, you got like 35 musicians on stage. He starts these grooves really slowly, usually the section or the rhythm section first. And they hold it down for like 3 or 4 minutes. Then he adds in the rhythm guitars. Then eventually you get like the horns coming in with like these James Brown horn stabs. And then the thing that's amazing to me about Afrobeat, like when it first came into the world, is that it's like a it's like 25 little motifs from all the different instruments interlocking into this kind of crazy 12-dimensional clock where the gears are just interlocking and there's no friction. And so the experience of listening to that kind of music is that it just repeats and repeats and repeats until you fall into it. And then you start to hear all those relationships between the different
Hmm.
instruments.
Hmm.
And it's like the best trance music you've ever heard?
Yeah.
And
That's
then
the
he
thing about it.
sings.
It's
He doesn't
yes.
even sing until 20 minutes in. And
Yes.
that's a whole experience of like
Well, and
suddenly
those
his
lyrics are
voice.
directly political. Like
Oh
I was
yeah,
like hearing some of those songs, he is naming the bad things that politicians are doing. He is talking about the ills of his society, and he names it directly. And it stands in
yeah,
such stark contrast to me when I look at our current crop of mega wattage pop stars. They nod towards protest. They nod towards the imagery of protest. They don't name these things directly. Fella
yeah.
named it. He
Oh
named it.
yeah. He was talking about Ronald Reagan. He's talked about Margaret Thatcher. It's the I love the experience of listening to his music because it's like the trance takes you out of time, and then suddenly he sings and he whoom, puts you right back in, and he's talking about specific people, and so it's like he takes you out of your moment, puts you back in, so you're seeing it new. Then he talks to you about politics while you're dancing, so you're like already moving, right? So it's like a short step to take that new knowledge and convert it into action, which is
Hmm.
what happened. Like suddenly the music created a mass political movement, you
Wow.
know?
Wow. I kind of, when I'm thinking about how to describe Afrobeat, I kind of think it's like it's the same way that I would describe like reggaeton to a beginner. It's like there'll be this classic percussive beat that undergirds like most of it, like a boom, chap, chap, boom, chap, boom. Chap. It's not a Western American four to the floor. It is a syncopated, slower, almost halftime groove that you can just play for half an hour, like boom, chicka, boom, chicka, boom, and then all the other instruments come in and it builds and it builds and it builds. But yeah, like one of the big things of his music is that he is trying to get everyone locked into a trance with him and go where he's trying to take you, to the extent where like the musicians that you spoke to in the podcast were like, we'd be so damn tired because we had to play the same licks for half an hour, for 45 minutes. You don't know how long it's going to go on. Fella is just having you play and play and play. And the beauty of Afrobeat and his version of it was that it was quite repetitive.
Yeah.
It was repetitive.
And he would find the musicians if they messed up. So if you messed up 4 times in the course of like a 45-minute song, you've lost money, you know?
Wow.
So
Wow.
he was not exactly forgiving about that stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No.
what I find so fun about, like, when you go to like a dance party and then you look around across the room and you're like, wow, there's so many, like that person's dancing to a different rhythm than that person. Like
Yeah.
inside the world of an Afrobeat song, you've got like halftime, like some of the instruments are halftime. And then some of like the shaker might be doing double time. And so you can fall into halftime if you're listening to like the rhythm section, and then you could lean into double time if you're listening to the shaker, and suddenly there's like all of these possibilities inside the organism of the song,
Totally.
you know?
Totally. Well, and like the possibility allows you to like find your perfect corner in that room and just stay there.
Exactly.
Like you can do Afrobeat and like walk to it. You can crawl to it. You can run to it. It's at that perfect BPM that allows you to experience it in a lot of different kind of fun ways. I don't know. It feels like, if I'm speaking from the heart, the perfect global music genre, because there's kind of something in it for everybody, and you can find a variation within there that speaks directly to you.
I love the way you just put that, because it's like the music is construct. For me, it feels like a truly like big tent kind of music, because you have everyone can kind of latch onto one piece of it. Um, but it's interesting to me that he called it like the first original African music. You know, I
Huh.
don't know if he
That's a
used that
bold
phrase.
statement.
Maybe he said it. Maybe he said it was authentic African music. Like, so he saw it as like rooted in the continent. Uh, but you hear it now, given that all of the sort of pop music that we consume is in some way a part of the African diaspora, right?
Yeah.
So now it's just become globalized in a way
Yeah. Yeah.
and rooted in place. It's interesting that way.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
What is your favorite fella Afrobeat song?
If I like, it depends on what I need, right? So like today's Monday when we're talking, it's the kind of day where like you need some energy, So I will put on "Let's Start," which is 1971, I believe. It's an album he made with Ginger Baker, and there's a song on it called Let's Start, and it is like pure energy. It comes in, it doesn't do the slow burn that a lot of his songs do. It just comes in like a cannon. And I'll put that on if I have to get on a bike or something. But if it's Thursday and you're processing the weight of things, I might put on like ODOO, which is later, much later, and it's slower and it's heavier later in his life when he's like really grappling with like, was it all worth it? You know? And that's a song that like really makes you sort of just look at the reality of like how much change can happen, like what is actually possible. And and there's a place for that too, So like I like his newer stuff. I'm sorry, his early stuff better because it's just fiercer and funner. But yeah, but the later stuff is really good too.
Oh yeah. There was a moment in like pandemic lockdown where I was running a lot because like what else did I have to do, you know?
Mm.
And I remember probably for about 2 or 3 months, my last song on my run playlist for like the last half of mile 5 was, or just the last mile even because it was so long, was Fela's Zombie,
Yeah.
because that song pumps you up so much. There's like this little break in the middle where you think it's about to end, and then he's like, "Nope, still here," and it goes on for like 7 minutes.
I know.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
The stamina of his music like motivates you to keep doing whatever the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if this band can play for 20 minutes, I can run one last mile. I can do it.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your favorite? And I'm thinking about politically minded lyrics. What is your favorite Fela lyric from all this music?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a really good question. Let me think. That's
Take your time.
I like you mentioned Zombie, right?
Yeah.
I that one hits for me still. That like he talks about and I take it to be it's one of his most what's the word? What's the word when you're I'm having a senior moment. It's
That's
like
all right.
it's very mischievous in a way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also like you can apply it to anything. And he was talking about the Nigerian military and how they'd kill if you told them to kill. They'd die if you told them to die. They go left if you turn them to left. So I like the way he constructs that. It's like they'll do anything. They'll go left if you say left, right if they say right, die if you say die. But what I hear in that song is the way in which we're all turned into zombies by the numbing onslaught of information, and by the consumer culture that's sort of like wrapped around us. Like we all have that in some way. It's like a song that tells us to wake up, basically, and to exert our freedom and to suffer for it. Like that's the piece of it. It's like that song is arguably what got his compound burned down and his mother thrown out of a window. Um, because they came out right before that and it enraged the military. Because he was calling them, brainless
Zombies.
automatons.
Yeah.
So there's it's this it's a song that for me is about how you got to wake up, but how you also have to be sober about the fact that if you're truly awake, you will suffer. But at least you chose the suffering. It wasn't simply given to you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Let's talk about, because this is as much a part of who he was and what his music was. Let's talk about his compound. Let's talk about the shrine. Let's talk about the literal, I don't know, kind of palace he built up around himself.
Yeah.
The shrine is hard to explain. It's just, it was a nightclub, but it was so much more.
Yeah. It's we one of the great parts of our visit to Lagos is we got to go there a bunch of times and just sort of experience it. Yeah, it is on the most basic level, it's a nightclub. You go in, it maybe can fit 500 people. It's got a roof over the stage, but the dance floor is sort of open air. Um, the shrine that we went to is slightly different than the original because it's moved around a lot because it was shut down a million times by the authorities. And he called it the shrine because in the front he has a little altar to Kwame Nkrumah, first president of Ghana, Malcolm X, and his mother, who is an incredible story. Like, it's a kind of a crime to me that like we don't like she deserves her own 15 episode podcast for what she did. But anyhow, so it's this place, and particularly in the 70s and 80s when Nigeria had a very kind of brutal dictatorship, that was openly killing people, like murdering thieves on the beach. I shouldn't say murdering, like executing. Um, and when people came to the shrine, like it was this bubble of freedom in an otherwise repressive world. Um, you couldn't smoke weed outside, like you get 10-year sentence for smoking pot. But inside, people smoked openly, you know? And it was interesting when we went there, even to this day, smoking pot is not legal in Nigeria, and you can still be put in jail. But people did it on the streets, and the police would stand like about a block and a half away, almost like
Hmm.
they were behind this invisible line. So like the
Wow.
shrine still exists right now as this like,
Sacred space almost.
yeah, or sovereign,
Wow.
Like
Yeah.
he really did, and he did literally declare the shrine and his compound, the Calacuta Republic, as he named it, sovereign spaces, like a country within a country, kind
Huh.
of like the Vatican.
Huh.
So
What does that say about him as a person?
it says that he's somewhere between courageous and insane, is what it
Wow.
says,
Yeah.
or both, really. Because
Yeah.
I mean, and Sam, the thing that blows my mind is that he did it a year after the government had put down a brutal rebellion. Like there had been a civil war in Nigeria. And then this guy shows up and says, I'm my own country. Which, like, if you're the government and you've just literally killed 1 million people
Mm-hmm.
to try and, quote, unify Nigeria,
Mm-hmm.
that to me is the ballsiest move I can imagine.
Was it ballsy or crazy?
Yeah, both. Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I
When you
mean,
s-
it's what made him so popular
yeah.
to young people because they're like, this guy, like,
Yeah.
this is the way forward.
How much of it, Fella doing that in that moment, making the most protest music ever and declaring his own personal space as a sovereign nation, doing that after a civil war that killed 1 million people, how much of that is a testament to his true political uh, a conviction, and how much of it is an egomaniac feeding his ego and finding a way to get attention in a really weird moment?
I think it's both. I think it would be only the latter if he stopped there. But I think it's both because he, from 1972 all the way through the end of that decade, he was repeatedly raided by the police. At that point, the dictatorship had a war on indecency. And in his compound, you have hundreds of young people smoking pot, lots of sex. So they would just constantly raid his compound. And he would, I mean, on the regular get the snot beaten out of him. I mean, coming home from jail with like bandages wrapped around his head. And then he would make a song about the raid that then would become a big hit that would get him raided again. And he'd make another song about it. So his commitment was unquestionable. Like he was an egomaniac. He was insane. I mean, I don't think it's going out on a limb to say that, but he committed hard. And I feel like that's where it went from just being a stunt to being something much, much more.
Yeah, yeah. It was very interesting listening to your podcast and loving the idea of Fela Kuti and loving the music. I also said to myself somewhere around episode 3 or 4, I was like, I don't think I would ever want to hang out with this guy.
Yeah, I know.
Would you want to?
No, I don't think I could. I mean, there was just there was a level of casual violence that followed him around that I just don't think I would have the stomach for. And a lot of his band left because they were like, we're tired of getting our asses beaten. You know, it's like there is a personal cost to that way of living that you just I don't know if I could do it. You know?
Yeah. There is a very poignant moment in the podcast when you're talking about Fela's political shift, which led to a musical shift, which came out of his first time being in the States and meeting folks that would open up his eyes and his mind to political activism and Black activism. And you talk a lot about how that cultural exchange affected his politics and also his music, and how someone like James Brown was a creative who was kind of in musical conversation with him and his work for a while, and it went both ways. But it was more than just James Brown. What Fella was doing and what he was making, it was part of this centuries long cultural back and forth between Africa and African Americans. And at one point, you bring on some of the folks who worked on the show with you who make this really interesting point that I haven't been able to stop thinking about since I heard it. You said that the idea of, James Brown and Fela being in conversation, and the idea of African music and Black music here in the States being in conversation, it speaks to this larger reality in that Black Africans have always looked to African Americans for a future and what their future could look like. Whereas African Americans have looked to Africa for some semblance of history. And while both of those looks, have happened with love, it also can sometimes reduce entire cultures to props for the other.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in how you got to that realization with your team and what it felt to like have someone explain that to you. Because when I heard y'all say it, I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. This idea of that kind of exchange feels incredible to me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I love the way you just put that. I mean, it's so that phrase that, Africans on the continent look to African Americans for the future. African Americans look to Black Africans on the continent for the past, right? Like that phrase came from a scholar named Louis Chudasoki, who wrote what is to me one of the most beautiful books about about the absurdity and the beauty of searching for identity in a land that isn't yours. It's called Floating in a Most Peculiar Way. I won't sort of, I could take you down a long rabbit hole about that book, but that was his phrase. And I think it's really, for me as a storyteller, one of the principal things I was trying to solve in that particular episode was that it was the episode where Sandra, who we talked about, and Fela fall in love. And Sandra describes this moment. Now, Sandra, she was a Black American who was on her own journey of identity, right? She grew up in a white neighborhood, thinking she would literally turn white one day, like all the other kids. But then, sort of, in college and beyond, starts to really discover her identity as a Black American. Fela is going in the opposite direction, right? So they meet, and they meet at this party where Fela's playing. And she walks by the stage. He looks down. They lock eyes, and she describes it as like this gaze that she's never experienced in her life. Like something happened in that between them, and I wanted to find a way to explain that on a few different levels. It's a personal, intimate connection, but it's also something more. Because like nobody knows a person by just looking at them. Like you're projecting onto that person and you're relating to that projection, right? So like, what is the relationship? When he said that, when Louis Chudasoki said that, I was like, oh, that's the gaze. That's what they're seeing in each other, right? She's seeing a connection to something ancient, and he's seeing a future that's opening up, right? And so it became this metaphoric way to explain a really intimate, personal moment in the story. And the moment he said that, I was just like, oh, chills. I could,
Yeah,
it just,
yeah.
it was that feeling of finding a center when you're trying to tell a story,
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, and like this is the thing though. It's like that idea of such a cultural exchange between the past and the future, between the continent and the diaspora, is so romantic, but it can easily become perverted when what you're forcing upon the other is trope and stereotype. I'll never forget when I first got to Africa. I interned in South Africa for the State Department for about 3 months.
No
And it
way.
was amazing, and watching that country uh, become something out of the ashes of apartheid was a sight to behold. They're still not there yet, but like seeing a nation at that state was like, whoa, mind blowing. But I'll never forget their obsession with the idea of African Americans as the future. It struck me as so silly. On several occasions, I'd be out and about in South Africa, in Pretoria, in Joburg, and I'd meet new people who were really nice. And one, they could always clock an American, black or white. They knew right away. And within 4 or 5 minutes, many of the black South Africans would ask me the strangest questions, like, "So have you met Jay Z and Beyonce? What is it like to, do the breakdancing all the time?" And I'm just like, "No, that's not it. We don't do that. I'm just like I'm a
Yeah.
nerd." But like there's it's very easy to turn that idea of cultural and historical exchange into one that just plays in trope. And I feel like someone like Fela was probably dealing with that too. I bet there was a way in which Americans wanted to see an African like him making music, and a way in which Africans expected an African like him to make music.
Oh, for sure. And I think there's even a way in which he defined African culture to himself in ways that were tropish. I mean, like he justified his bizarre, absurd version of polygamy by saying, "Well, this is traditional African culture," but it's not
Wow.
actually.
Yeah,
Like
no.
historically, it's just not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and there are ways in which I think he was seeing not just African Americans, but also African Africans as in cartoonish ways.
Fela's legacy is so big when you look at it and listen to it and think about it. But did he ever see that and see his impact and have space to acknowledge it while he was alive?
Oh man, great question. Yeah, that's. I mean, he was on the one level, he was not shy about his own opinion of himself, right? He really believed he was that he thought that James Brown and others were stealing from him. Like he had this idea that he was musically like the epicenter. Wasn't entirely wrong, but in terms of the political movement that he was trying to create, I don't. I think he died. I have to guess, feeling defeated. You know, after his house was burned down, and particularly after his mother was killed, he gradually started to turn away from politics. And then, as you get to the later parts of his life, he's singing songs that are very narrative about people, like ODOO that I mentioned earlier. That's a song about a young African man who just wants to buy a fan because the mosquitoes keep biting him and he wants to blow them away. But every time he tries to buy a fan, the government monkeys with the currency, and then the exchange rate for naira goes way up. So suddenly the 200 naira fan costs 600 naira. So he has to save more and more. And as soon as he's about to buy the fan, it goes up again. And at the end of the song, this character in the song basically decides that he's never going to be happy, that this country will never let him be happy. And so it's
Wow.
really a song about defeat, right? And you
Mm.
have to hear Fela himself. That's him himself saying that.
Do you think he felt
Um,
defeat?
I I think he, on some level, felt like he's given his whole life to a kind of revolution, and it's only advanced things a few inches. Um, but if he could have come back from the dead 26 years after his death, he would have seen a legion of young people go out into the street and protest police brutality in Nigeria. This is happening concurrently with the George Floyd protests in America. And what were they playing? They were playing Fela, right? They were like, he was soundtracking that revolution. And so like, I think he would have smiled because he's like, oh, it's continuing, you know? And he called music the weapon of the future. And I have to believe that that's what he was talking about, is that this music is going to come back and it's going to soundtrack more revolutions. Long after we've forgotten the names of the dictators, this music will still be going round and round. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear you talk about how Fela's music became the soundtrack for protests against police brutality in Nigeria around the same time that people here were marching post George Floyd, playing a different kind of soundtrack. I remember the Kendrick Lamar song All Right becoming almost an accidental anthem of the movement. And I can't help but compare that to Fela as the soundtrack of a protest movement. And I can't help but think about how low the bar has fallen for what we classify as protest music. Kendrick's song kind of a little bit alludes to the police, and he just kind of says, "We hate the popo," and he moves on. And the song is about many other things. And I think about some of the artists that we have placed in the realm of protest, but they are just kind of performing the imagery of protest. I think about Beyonce, who is the most visionary pop star of our time. And she does this really great thing where she will dress like a Black Panther or sit on a New Orleans police car while it sinks into the ocean to symbolize Katrina. And so she has the imagery and trappings of protest, but she never talks or sings about it. I feel the same way with Kendrick. And I feel like in the midst of an era that has been full of protest, we've moved from one to another. We've moved from Occupy Wall Street to Me Too to George Floyd to Black Lives Matter. And we've yet to have in that moment, in these moments, any real good protest music. What is that about? I feel like if Fela Kuti were alive today, he would make songs that spoke specifically to these moments and use direct words to name this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Something about our current crop of pop stars, even the ones we think are making protest music, when you look at their lyrics, they're not. They're
Yeah,
not.
I
Do you feel
know.
that?
I do feel that. I do. I mean, I feel that completely. I also have the feeling often when like pop stars or artists speak out, I'm like, even if I agree with the politics, I always feel like, man, your music is speaking in one language and what you're saying now is a different language. Like there's some way in which the music, it's like you're not speaking in your native tongue. So, is how I always feel like when artists and musicians speak out against politics. Um, and I wish that they would somehow be able to say it in the music, not just lyrically, but the music itself somehow. Like that's what Fela brought to it, is that he created a musical structure that was designed to make people turn revelation into action, right? Like he figured that out. I don't see anyone doing anything close to that. And I also like the question I ask a lot, just I don't really ask this in the podcast, but I think about it is, could Fela happen now?
I was going to ask you that same question. I don't
You
think so.
know, I don't think so, but because it's the atomized attention hellscape that we're in. Can anyone have the kind of gravity that they would need to make that change? And I think no, but maybe like a group of people could come together,
Hmm.
like a network.
A collective. Yeah.
A collective could form enough, could gather to themselves enough attention that they could move the needle. I don't know. I saw like with all the with the a lot of the Gaza protests that were happening, and you had all of these artists coming out. It almost felt like for a moment I was like, oh, maybe that's the beginning of something, you
It
know?
almost, but then like it didn't.
But then it didn't. Yeah.
And the only true blue protest song about Palestine from an American artist, I kid you not, Macklemore made a Palestine song. Macklemore.
Yeah.
He was the only one.
He was the
He was
only
the only
one.
one.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of things speak to this. I think more than in Fela Kuti's day, you have to be a corporate beast and a corporation to be a pop star. Like the business of being a pop star is much more capitalistic today than it was before. And doing that means that you cannot do things that would damage the potential reach of all the tentacles of the brand. And it just makes it harder. And I think that like if you are Beyonce, you are consistently trying to make sure that the audience you have will give you as much money in as many different ways as possible. I want you to stream the album and buy the vinyl and buy the merch and go to the show and buy my hair care products and do all the things. And anything that affects those pockets of money, you're not going to do it. Right. Whereas, like, it felt like in Fela's day, you just make the song. And if you like the song, you like the song. And the point of the whole point of Fela Kuti is just the song. Whereas now it feels like the whole point of pop stardom is to build the empire of the pop star, which requires a more careful tending to one's politics, which means not
Yeah.
alluding to them too much. I
Yeah.
don't know.
But I no, I completely agree with you. But I do think also like Beyonce could choose not to do that. You know, like that's a choice she could make. I mean, she could make that choice. She's one of the few, I think, who could make that choice and prosper. Taylor Swift, I mean, Taylor Swift has not shown a lot of desire for politics. I mean, maybe a little bit. She could choose. Like that's a choice that today's pop stars could make. But you're right. You're totally right. That's why I feel like a cluster of them together could break through and maybe support each other. I don't know. It's hard. That part of it is really difficult because the system is not forgiving anymore. You know?
Anywho, um, I would ask you an hour's more of questions, but I've already spoken to you for an hour, and I'm just excited that we had this time together.
Yeah.
I
Same.
think it is so fascinating to just see where your mind goes. And I'm like, I wonder what he's going to do next because you've given us so many great things. I'm thinking about the Dolly Parton podcast, the Supreme Court podcast, now this one on Fela. I can't wait to hear what you do next. So please save me a conversation when that happens.
Oh, of course. You'll be the first person I reach out to.
I love
And
it.
and Sam, it's such a pleasure talking to you. I love the way you process things. It's cool. It's
Oh,
very
I
cool.
appreciate you. I appreciate you. Oh my God. Thank you. Made my day. Made my day.
Ah.
Listen, Chad, I want everyone listening to this conversation to go find your podcast right now. Tell folks one more time what it is.
Yeah, podcast is called Fela Kuti, Fear No Man. It's, wherever people do the podcasts, it's
Yeah.
on that. So
Yeah.
Spotify, Apple, everything.
Yeah. And if you're on the fence, if this chat didn't sell you, it's gotten a ringing endorsement from President Barack Obama.
That's true.
So there's
That's
that.
true.